The Constitutional Court held its first preparatory hearing on this Friday afternoon as it undertakes the impeachment trial of President Yoon Suk-yeol for his imposition of martial law on the night of December 3rd. We have more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Friday, December 27th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. A legal team representing the president was in attendance at the first preparatory hearing at the Constitutional Court on this Friday afternoon. For more on this, I have Yang Chien-Hao, a journalist from Taiwan based here in Seoul. Chien-Hao, it's always great to have you here in the studio.
Good evening. Thanks for having me here.
I also have Raphael Rashid, a journalist from the UK, also based here in Seoul. Raphael, it's a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Right, Chien-Hao, let's begin with the latest on the impeachment trial at the Constitutional Court. I believe the first preparatory hearing was held earlier on this Friday afternoon. Right. What more can you tell us?
So the problem is if you open the trial, you need some basis, you need documents or those replies from the litigant or the defendant toward certain issues. And the Constitutional Court has already asked President Yoon to send documents of evidence and the meeting minutes of the State Council before the martial law. But President Yoon hasn't submitted anything. He even hadn't decided his legal defense team. But everything has changed today as he finally chose 3 lawyers for him. And so both the delegation lawyer group from the National Assembly and the president's defense team have attended the first meeting several hours ago. And the next meeting was also being decided on January 3rd next year. But let me say it critically that after the martial law incident, President Yoon has mentioned that he won't avoid any legal or political responsibility related to the martial law declaration. But till yesterday, we hadn't seen him taking any actions, neither politically or legally. He rejected resigning, he rejected receiving the investigation, and he rejected the impeachment trial. And it is only till today such little progress can be seen. Seems he's trying to procrastinate or trying to buy more time, and that has made everything being delayed.
Right then, Raphael, as Chien-Hao just mentioned, a second summons served to President Yoon Suk-yeol went unanswered on Christmas Day. I believe a third one has been served for the 29th of December. That being said, so what is the latest with regard to the investigation on insurrection charges against the president?
Yeah, like you just mentioned, there are multiple investigations on different fronts. But these investigations seem to be facing quite a lot of resistance from President Yoon. The joint investigation team comprising of the Corruption Investigation Office, the police and military investigators have issued a third summons for him to appear on December 29th after he ignored the 2 previous ones. But the investigators are essentially pursuing charges of insurrection and abuse of power related to the martial law declaration. And while they considered an arrest warrant after the second no-show, they've opted to give maybe perhaps one more shot, another opportunity for him to voluntarily appear for questioning, likely to ensure that all proper procedures are followed before attempting any forced measures against the sitting president. His lawyers, or Yoon through his lawyers, have indicated that essentially they won't cooperate until the impeachment trial takes place. It takes precedence, they say, and they will also face maybe practical issues, such as if he does become arrested, then they would have to wrap up the probe very quickly, which I think they won't have a lot of time to do. So all things considered, I think the prospect of Yoon to be directly questioned are quite low at the moment.
Right. In the meantime then, Chien-Hao, what has been shared by the president's legal team with regard to the impeachment trial and, of course, the insurrection charges that he faces?
So last week, I've met the President Yoon's consulting lawyer, Mr. Sok Dong-hyun, who was President Yoon's very old friend, and also they were both like prosecutors before. So Mr. Sok held a press conference in his law firm, and it is also authorized by President Yoon himself. So we've asked Mr. Sok, why does the president not respond and receive any investigation from the police, from the corruption investigation office for high-ranking officials, and why doesn't he respond to the hearing in the Constitutional Court last week? If it's like that, won't it be risky for President Yoon himself? Just like Raphael has mentioned, it might have some possibilities by being arrested. And he told us that he can't make any comments about that, but once the legal defense team being formed, then they will decide it and have announced publicly. And seems that picking lawyers, choosing lawyers, and make up the team is a more difficult progress for President Yoon, and it had taken longer time than we have expected. And finally, it's done this morning. But the interesting thing is he expressed to us what President Yoon is thinking. He told us that President Yoon had no intention to cause insurrection, and he doesn't agree to be charged with insurrection either, insisting that it was really an emergency situation and critical situation for him, which made him himself unavoidably announce the martial law. And he said that once the National Assembly voted to repeal the martial law during 1:30 p.m. that day, he accepted. And had made the army forces withdraw from the National Assembly Hall. And if he wanted to cause insurrection, he wouldn't even withdraw the troops. And he even didn't make any orders of arresting politicians. But this is very different from the testimonies from the military or the intelligence, because we've heard several people saying that President Yoon called them and ordered them to arrest or clean out those not only politicians from the opposition party, but also including ruling party leader Han Dong-hoon and even some judges. Also, the police had found the the small notebook mentioning the plans of sending troops and detaining politicians and media workers and labor union people from the former Defense Intelligence Commander's house. So you can see that those claims, those testimonies, indeed they are contradicting. And President Yoon now is refusing anything. It is predictable that his claims will definitely be called in question publicly. And very coincidentally, that just 1 hour before our show started, the prosecutor has announced that they've confirmed that the president really he did order the troop to enter into the National Assembly Hall, asking them to destroy the gate by gun or through other ways to drag those people out.
Right, and also about an hour ago, Raphael, the opposition-led parliament voted in support of an impeachment motion against acting President Han Duck-soo. Could you explain this latest development for us?
Yeah, very dramatic scenes in the National Assembly over the past hour and a half, who have voted to impeach the acting president, Han Duck-soo, with all 192 lawmakers present voting in favor. And this marks the first time in South Korea's constitutional history that an acting president has been suspended from duties. Han Duck-soo was impeached on 5 counts, including refusal to appoint 3 constitutional court justices needed for President Yoon's impeachment trial. The opposition accuses him of deliberately obstructing and colluding with Yoon's martial law declaration. And while the ruling party argued that impeachment required 2/3 majority like a presidential impeachment in the National Assembly, the Speaker, Woo Won-sik, ruled that a simple majority of 151 would be sufficient since Han was impeached as a prime minister and not a president. So now with Han's suspension, his powers will now transfer to Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok, who also doubles as Deputy Prime Minister, and he will become the third person to lead the country in less than a month since the martial law declaration. And this is basically an unprecedented, uncharted territory that might perhaps deepen the current constitutional political crisis in this country.
Right, it is for sure deepening the political divide at the parliament, with the ruling party choosing to boycott the vote this afternoon. Chien-Hao, what more can you tell us about the response from the ruling People Power Party?
I've covered Korea for 12 years already. I've experienced President Park Geun-hye being impeached in the end of 2016, and now it has happened again, this time on President Yoon. It is really clear that the PPP, the ruling party, the conservative, has totally different reactions this time. We can see that most of the members from the ruling party, they are trying to protect, or we can say trying to defend President Yoon. We had 3 vacancies now in the Constitutional Court in order to minimize the controversy over the impeachment voting from the Constitutional Court. The Democratic Party had approved to the motion to appoint 3 candidates for the constitutional judges yesterday. Indeed, 2 among the 3, 2 are recommended by the Democratic Party, but the party has decided to let all the 3 pass. But the PPP, the ruling party, refused to attend the vote, and they are even claiming that the acting president, which is now being impeached, Han Duck-soo, should not appoint these 3 candidates, insisting that the acting president has no power to do so. But the strange thing is that the current constitutional judges and secretaries and spokesmen and most of the legal experts and professors who I've covered, who I've interviewed, they all say that there is no problem for acting president to do so. So you can see that the floor leader of the ruling party, Kwang Song-dong, he's saying that he's still insisting that the Han Duck-soo has no power to appoint the 3 constitutional judges. But actually, 7 years ago, when President Park was facing impeachment, he told the journalists that the acting president is able to appoint them, to appoint the judges. So his words, his claims is contradicting too. And it seems now the ruling party is also trying to buy more time, just like President Yoon is doing.
And beyond the political arena, Raphael, we continue to see public protests, both in support for the president and, of course, against the president, even on Christmas Day, I believe. What, Raphael, have you been hearing from the people on the ground?
Yeah, the protests, as you said, have been, I guess, they've been continuing, if not mounting, before the impeachment, but also after. Nightly, the protests are continuing and also intensifying after Han Duck-soo announced that he would not basically be appointing justices at the Constitutional Court. And just yesterday evening, there were thousands of people gathered near Gyeongbokgung Station in Seoul. Of course, they were holding in their hands the K-pop light sticks that have become synonymous with these demonstrations over the past few weeks. The protesters themselves against Yoon are essentially demanding not only for his removal, but they're also demanding for him to be imprisoned. They're also demanding for the People Power Party, the ruling party, to be dismantled, because they accuse the PPP of being complicit in what they term an attempted insurrection. Of course, throughout, these protests have also maintained a distinct, maybe festive character, somewhat reminiscent of a K-pop concert. There are, of course, the opposition to impeachment protests that are usually taking place in Gwanghwamun area. They tend to be a lot more aggressive and a lot louder, and also of an older generation, because notably these protests continue to see strong participation from the young people against President Yoon, from young women in their 20s and 30s who have emerged as a key demographic in this protest movement, in the anti-Yoon protest movement. And recent polls have shown that the large majority of the public does support impeachment, particularly strong among the younger voters, including young women that I've just mentioned.
Right. Moving forward, Chien-Hao, on the diplomatic front now, what are some of perhaps the near future challenges that South Korea looks to face amid this leadership vacuum here in the country, and how prepared is the country to better deal with these challenges?
I think the martial law thing happened. It's going to cause some severe problems indeed, because the declaration of martial law, which was very problematic, it was even the United States were not being informed in advance. It will definitely have very negative effects diplomatically, especially to the allies such as the United States and Japan, because countries will begin to have doubts on the ability of the decision-making of the Seoul regime. We can see that many scheduled meetings between South Korea and other countries' leaders and diplomats are being postponed or even being cancelled these days. And now President Yoon is being impeached by the National Assembly. So Prime Minister Han, though acting as the president in the past 2 weeks, he cannot fully make whole decisions, and it is somehow like a transitional period, I should say. Even even after now, the Prime Minister Han is being impeached, the next acting president comes out, it will be the same. It's just this transitional period. But the problem is that in the United States, like President Trump is coming back in January, very soon, and there will be leadership vacuum, just like you've mentioned, in South Korea for at least 4 or 5 or even 6 months. If it's like that, will South Korea be able to handle the new term of President Trump and also deal with the North Korea issues with Washington? That is the problem. And so last week, like Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol had a press briefing with us. Me and Raphael was on the conference, and he claimed that the government is now planning some roadmaps and some plans for the likely coming negotiations between the United States and North Korea. But later, privately, he told us that till now, the government is still unable to reach Trump, explaining the current situation. So now the top priority is to contact with people close to President Trump and even have dialogues or interactions. So there are already some concerns worrying that if South Korea can't handle this well, then it will be very likely that President Trump will neglect Seoul and make decisions directly himself toward the northeastern and North Korean issues after he takes office. So-called Korea passing. It will be the worst situation.
Hopefully that wouldn't be the case. Hopefully we'll be able to deal with this internal turmoil. Raphael, then, keeping in mind the timeline of the Constitutional Court's prior impeachment trials, when can we expect a verdict on the political fate of the president, and what scenarios are we looking at depending on that verdict?
Very good question, and not an easy question to answer.
Not at all.
Unfortunately, as Chien-Hao mentioned just earlier, the Constitutional Court held its first preparatory hearing today, with Yoon's team hastily appointing legal representation. And so we'll see the next hearing on January 3rd at the Constitutional Court, which has technically 180 days to rule on whether or not to go ahead with this impeachment, although, as I understand, this can actually extend. So if we take into consideration the 180-day rule, we could see a decision until perhaps June 2025. But of course, there are several factors to take into consideration that might accelerate this. So if we look at the previous impeachment trials in Korea, for example, Roh Moo-hyun, his case took 63 days, and Park Geun-hye's case took 91 days. So following these precedents, I think we could see a verdict as early as February or even March at the latest. And if Yoon is removed, this would trigger, of course, a snap election that would have to take place within 60 days. So that could be maybe April or May. Another factor to consider is that the court is likely to aim to conclude this perhaps by mid-April, because it is then that 2 justices at the court will be retiring. So many things to consider. Overall, the court will have to decide two things: whether conditions justified martial law, and if Yoon's actions were grave enough to warrant his removal. And as we've been saying throughout this program, they will need 6 votes to uphold impeachment, but currently they only have 6 justices instead of the full bench of 9, which has caused this entire chaos and hence the impeachment of Han Dok-soo. Yoon's lawyers have indicated that he may personally appear at the Constitutional Court as and when the time comes. So they haven't exactly explained what that means, but whether he's removed or reinstated, this case will represent only the second time in South Korean history that a president has faced such potential removal by the Constitutional Court following Park Geun-hye's impeachment in 2017. And if he is reinstated, we'll see the return of a deeply unpopular president coming back in power, probably another year and a half or 2 years as a lame duck as president. So very, very uncertain times ahead.
Right. In the meantime, a very gloomy winter for Korea then. All right, Raphael, thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you.
And Chien-Hao, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Right, well, that ends Press Perspective today. Thank you for watching. Have a good weekend.